If you're haven't been here for a few weeks, I'm on a theme, and the theme came from my memory. I've never put it this way, but I'll put it this way now. My memory of standing in a graveyard, and two people come to me, and they say, "Should our son have a bar mitzvah?" Now, you need to know something about these kinds of questions. I had just officiated at a funeral. The funeral was a woman who was born in Berlin and died in Brentwood. I love the alliteration there. You can imagine all the life that went on in between. But the person comes to the United States, has family, has children, dies at 89 years old. It's what we in the business call an easy funeral. This person died in peace with lots of children and grandchildren around. And you think to yourself, if I'm going to go, that's how I want to go. So these a couple came up to me and said, "Rabbi," and yes, I'm the rabbi, the guy just over there putting that person in the ground. I am he. Uh, Question for you. I said, okay. Why should our son have a bar mitzvah? And I knew that I was there to resolve a conflict, the way they asked it and looked at me. So I had a response. I said, "Well, does your son have a soul?" And they looked at each other and asked a couple questions. Said, "Yes, our son has a soul." And I said, "Well, what are you doing about that? What do you?" I To our topic tonight from the poem. You providing any guidance for the soul? And they said to me, "Are you saying that a religious school can provide guidance for the soul in a bar mitzvah?" And I think I was honest to say, well, I would hope so. And between the clergy and the teachers and you and your son, maybe something could come out of it. And we went back and forth. And of course, in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I don't think I make a strong case for the state of current American Hebrew schools, but it was a very suggestive idea. Does your child have a soul? And I've never forgot that conversation. So I've been thinking over the years, what in Judaism, what in a religious school would make it worth it that it would speak to the soul? It's a question I've been asking ever since that day. And what came to me was the communities learning difficult texts together, a community learning difficult texts together. And I wrote in my first email to you, I think this is more important than theology, more important than history, more important than so many other things, is that our Bible, especially the Jewish Bible, presents us with very, very difficult text. And we can't look away. We may want to look away, but we ought not look away. And then we talk amongst ourselves and we can ask questions such as, because we're not Orthodox, we can say, who wrote this? For what purpose? Why did the editors put this text in the Bible at all? Why did they put it in here? What effect did they want this to have on the reader? What does it contribute to the overall project of the Bible, if there is such a thing? So I come at the Bible with so many different questions that these are questions that are asked me. So I asked myself, what are the four most difficult texts in the Bible? I had my list, and it seems that the last difficult text is a very subtle, difficult text because it all works out in the end. There's a hero, and the hero succeeds in the hero's mission, but something kind of dreadful is left on the floor. So I want to tell you briefly, we are now at the fourth of the five. We'll go into the fifth next week. It matches beautifully on the calendar because Tisha B'Av is coming up this week, the day of the commemoration. And what the rabbis did is instead of just focusing on the book of the Bible or the book of the Talmud, where the narrative is given of the Bible being destroyed, the rabbis did a brilliant thing. They said these horrible events were planted into history in the time of the Torah. So, for example, they said that the incident with the molten calf in Exodus chapter 32 went underground and ultimately in history resulted in the breaking of the gates of Jerusalem on the 17th of Tammuz in the year 70. Right? So try to remember, God comes down from the mountain, breaks the tablets. That sets into motion centuries later that the Romans will break the walls. Um, a few weeks later, the Israelites are at the borders of Canaan. They refuse to go into Canaan. That sets into motion centuries later the actual destruction of the temple. So the ancient rabbis have told us if you study Genesis 32, you'll understand the breaking down of the gates of Jerusalem. And if you study deeply the story of the spies, you will understand how Jerusalem came to be destroyed. It's a very suggestive idea. I don't know if it has a parallel anywhere, but it is certainly trying to tell us how, you know, how a story, which becomes a literary text, ends up creating history. And then, of course, we are left with understanding history by understanding a text. So these texts for today and last week and today fit right in that theme of the destruction of the temple in the year 70. But I'd like to go over the first one and maybe the second because I had a few questions. I like people just to restate their questions here in this forum. The first case, remember, was the Israelites all lining up in their tribes. I'm not sure what happened. I had military days, so I can imagine the drill instructor saying, "Fall in," and everybody falls into their platoons and battalions and everything. And there's this one guy doesn't know what to do, and we typically call him Private Smith. There's always this one guy running around, doesn't know where to line up. And Sergeant says, "Private Smith, find your platoon." And so Private Smith says, "Well, I don't know what my platoon is. I'm born of an Israelite woman, but I have an Egyptian father." And that's not so acceptable in those days. So, well, find somewhere to stand. So he goes to stand by the Danites, and they say, "You're not a Danite. You're not of the tribe of Dan. Your mother may have been, but tribal identity is patrilineal, not matrilineal." So that's one of those moments, and I know you've all had them, not to this degree. Literature is filled with them where the person finally says, "I've had enough. I've just had enough." It results in the shooting. Oftentimes something very, very violent. Hold on a second. It says, "My internet is not secure," and I got some complaints last time about unsecure internet. Let me see if I can fix this. Oh, this looks like to be my proper connection. All right, well, I hope it gets worked out in the wash. So many literary themes are of the person. The movie Breaking Apart, I think it was Michael Douglas. I can just think of a dozen more movies where a person finally gets to, "I've had enough." In literature, in military novels, I'm a big fan of both military biography and military history, and it's filled with the moments of, "I've had enough. This is the day." So he gets into a fight with someone in the camp. The rabbis assume he's getting to a fight with the person who's guarding the Danite tribe. It says, "Look, you cannot line up here. You're not a Danite. I get your point, but there is a way to become a Danite, and you're not it." It says they fight. Then it says this man, who's the son of an Israelite woman and the son of an Egyptian man, it says, "Vayikov et Hashem." Now, Vayikov et Hashem is the word that linkov means to pierce something like with a spear or a sharp hammer. Vayinkov et Hashem, and he pierced the divine name with a spear. Vayikalel, and he cursed. Um, now, I see the divine as a spirit, not as a material body, but the Bible does see the divine as moving between pure spirit and some kind of physical manifestation, more like smoke or incense or something. But the idea that this man could pierce the name of God and then curse it, I'm going to go along with the story and think some kind of damage was done. Either this was blasphemy, completely insulting. Maybe it was left at the level of insult. But I'm wondering if something deeper was done, or even something psychological. Meaning, however he did it, he pierced the name, Vayikovet Hashem. Everybody standing there, their hearts were pierced. Uh, you can imagine a group of people all standing for one purpose, for one good, and someone says something, and every person says, "Ow, you really hurt us when you said that. That was like everything we believe in just got torn apart." So this is the old days, and so he's putting in the stockade. They don't know what to do, and they end up executing him. Um, that's a worthwhile text studying because psychologically, what happened to him? Had he finally had enough? Did he blurt out words of blasphemy, or did he intend to blaspheme God? Was that his intent? Okay. In my mind, It's this supposedly omniscient, wise, good God that set up a system where a guy like me, through no fault of his own, my Egyptian father raped my Israelite mother, right? She didn't have an abortion. Here I am, that you haven't set anything up for me, right? In your omniscience, you couldn't see far enough into the future that I would not need a place to stay, that I would have an identity, right? So this whole idea of God is all knowing, all seeing, all good, and so forth. This guy just says, well, that's just a bunch of claptraps. Not true. Where's the goodness here? Where's the omniscience here? Where's the all powerful here? None of that is true. I don't think it's true anyway, but this guy knew it acutely and painfully, and apparently tried to take it out on God. And because there are rules against doing this, sometimes rules against doing something provide you for the way to do it. Like if they say don't do this, well then that's the way. The second text I wanted to bring up is the story of the spies. Now you'll remember in the Bible, the Israelites, and this is Numbers 13 and 14. They arrive at the land of Israel. It takes about 6 weeks to get from Sinai to the land of Canaan. Not 40 years, that came later. It took 6 weeks to get from Sinai to Canaan. They're all at the borders of Canaan in a place called Kadesh Barnea. They're assembling in Kadesh Barnea, probably to cut across the Negev and come in around where Jericho is. You find Jericho on the eastern portion of the West Bank. And the idea is to send out a reconnaissance unit. So they send out the 12 spies. When they come back, 10 of the 12 spies say, Eretz Zavat v'chalab, the land indeed flows with milk and honey. However, there are giants there, and we can't do it. We're not able to do it. Now, the Bible is of two minds about the giants. On one hand, the Bible points back to the book of Genesis and says, yeah, there were actually giants. Giants roamed the earth in those days. And they say, and they didn't go out of extinction for a long time. So he actually saw giants like Goliath. The whole tribe of Goliath was there. And, there's a lot of ways to take down a giant, like Jack and the Giant Killer. Yeah, every giant has a weak point. So we're gonna get a crew of guys together and they're gonna take down all the giants. Or it was projection, meaning they felt small, so people looked big. And what they said is, we look like grasshoppers to them. We were grasshoppers in their eyes. And I always made fun of that and said, did you ask them how you look to them? Did you say, hey, how do I look to you? Do I look like a grasshopper to you? Meaning they're projecting how they felt in the eyes of another person, which, by the way, is a very, very um, uh, uh, well-known psychological manifestation. Do other people know how I am feeling? Do other people know how I'm feeling? Have I been exposed? And there are certain people, if they feel something about them that is not whole, that causes shame and guilt, their greatest fear is being known, that other people will see them as they see themselves. That's a terrible feeling. According to Gershon Kaufman, one of the worst feelings you can have. You have your walking around sense of self, and then from some strange place, something in you says you're a lie. You're not who you think you are. You don't have substance in this world. You might not even be worthy of this world, and you just want to run and hide. And they come back from this reconnaissance mission, and they say, I'm going to call it a report of shame. They're giants there. We can't do it. And I can imagine what it meant for these heads of the tribes to come to Moses and say, please don't do this to us. They're begging him, please, please don't do this to us. Don't make us fight these people. We're too afraid to fight these people. Well, I think I'm among those who said, well, they had a failure of nerve. They were supposed to do what they were told. They want to kill Moses, go back to Egypt. And again, every time I've taught and studied this, I've taught it in a rather judgmental way. What I never done as I studied it is take their panic utterly seriously, take their shame utterly seriously, maybe even an accurate analysis of the situation where they say, hey, you think we can do this? We know ourselves. We know how well trained we are. We're not trained. We don't know how to do this. We're just a bunch of slavery renegades. There's no we can take an armed population in fortified cities. You see us a certain way, but you don't see us how we actually are. And I've seen many cases like this in military history where commanders sent soldiers straight into their deaths because the commander thought they ought to be able to do this. I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds, thousands of lives lost because commanders did not have a strong sense of who their soldiers were and who the enemy was. So maybe they were right. Maybe they were saying, "You don't understand, Moses. You're sending all of us, all of our, your Israel, your 600,000 soldiers. You want to get rid of us now? This is going to end very badly. We get rid of you. We're going to kill you, kill Aaron. We're going to get back to Egypt, do this all over again, and we're going to come back when we're ready." Well, of course, the divine will have nothing of this, and they are then sentenced to stay at Kadesh Barnea for 40 more years. That's where the 40 years in the desert misconception comes from. And during those 40 years, the idea is you will bear a new generation of children, and they will train like Spartans to become conquerors, to become warriors, to become soldiers. They'll be doing it from their youth. So on one hand, okay, this is my little animated version last time, they're saying, "Oh no, 40 years in the desert." And they're going, "It's exactly what we were asking for. You know, just give us some time to become soldiers. We'll be happy to do what you want us to do, but not today." So I'm of two minds about that. Now, but to take this seriously, I want to step inside of abject fear. I have felt abject fear in my life. I've been terrified of the future. Um, I have felt just completely inadequate to tasks. And, if I believed in a God that could just transport me out of the situation, I said, "Please, God, please get me out of here. I'm not up to this." Well, I don't believe that that kind of a God exists. So the answer was, well, deal with it. And so I've had to deal with it. Anyway, so that idea of what I'm going to call the inner life of abject fear and panic and what one does. So, when I think I've shared with all of you that I was introduced, I got um, the very unpleasant introduction to panic attacks when my second son, who served in Iraq when he was in the thick of the fighting twice. And unfortunately for me, right, and there was an embedded reporter from the New York Times that described every action. And so I could infer from this that there are people trying to kill my son, right? And even when I finally got my son on the phone, had a phone, the reporter had a phone, says, "You want to call your father?" So he calls me and I said, "What's up?" He says, "Dad, an RPG just went by my head and I could read the Cyrillic writing." He could read the Russian writing on the RPG as it zoomed right past his head. I thought that might be too much information. So I started having panic attacks. Someone's trying to kill my kid and I can't help him. More than that, when after high school, he says, "Dad, what do I do?" I said, "Join the Marines like your pa," right? Maybe not. So I was introduced. If you've never had a panic attack, it's one of the worst things imaginable. I mean, your body shuts down. You want to scream. You want to get out of your skin. You don't know when it's going to end. It feels worse than death. You'll do anything to not have it. And once it was out of the box, it would come back every now and then in other places, on an airplane or in a claustrophobic setting. And I had a good psychoanalyst at the side who was in many ways my supervisor because I counseled people, but also a, uh, a psychopomp, a guide of my soul. And he said, "Look, there's this thing called working with panic attacks, and you have to learn how to do it." And it had to do with grounding and breathing, and there's all kinds of different things you have to do and change your thoughts and meditation. And all that sounded feeble because panic attacks feel like an avalanche. They feel like the mountain has fallen apart. And working on panic attacks feels, I'm just going to stand here and I'm going to stop the avalanche. So I didn't believe in any of it, that anything could possibly stop this huge force of nature called a panic attack. So I started practicing it. I started to have my verses that I would repeat to myself. I used my imagination. I planted myself in the ground. I tried all kinds of different things, and it worked. I could not believe it. It worked. And they were less frequent, and then they were gone. Now I know they're there. One thing I do is I know where they are. I know the jail I put them in. So one of my spiritual practices every day is to go down to that jail cell. I say, "Are you guys good? Is there anything I can get you? Because I don't want you guys coming out today." So I'm in a constant negotiation with my locked up panic attacks to make sure they have no reason to break out of jail. I remember one time I went on an airplane, which is a terrible place of a panic attack. And so I get on the plane and I ask them, I'm going on this plane. I don't want you guys out. What do you need? They go, well, chocolate. I said, okay, I'll get you chocolate. And what else? And they had a whole list of things. If you give us this, we will stay in our cell. I said, okay. Right. And I brought a little bag of stuff. And every then now I would eat this and do that. And I was checking. I said, you guys good? Yeah, you keep feeding us chocolate. We don't need to get out. We're super happy here. It was the most bizarre feeling in my life how to negotiate with panic attacks. By the way, if you have panic attacks and you learn some kind of psychological way to work through, it's probably going to sound something like this: meditation, reformulating how you feel inside your body, and maybe even the skill of negotiating with the force of panic attacks, which lies latent within a person. In any case, they spend their 40 years in the desert, and I share with you again, I'm of two minds about it. Was it really a mutiny ready to go back to Egypt, or were they pushing Moses' hand by saying, we don't want to go? We are saying no. Take no for an answer. Some rabbi down the line is going to say, take no for an answer. Do what you got to do. He says, okay, you can stay here for 40 years. Thank you. That's what we were after. Now we come to today's person. Don't have too much to say about, but introduce him. So after this happens in Genesis, in Numbers 13 and 14, we come to Numbers chapter 15, and there's two stories, one story and one commandment. And the story is they found a man Mikoshesh Eitzim, gathering up sticks. It sounds like he was doing this in public. He wasn't hard to find. They arrested him. This is a grievous Sabbath violation. We don't know what to do with him. And the sense you got from the Torah is you didn't say a word. I mean, you try to imagine the cops come and say, you're picking up sticks. Yeah, okay. Put your hands behind your back. Take you to jail. No, didn't resist arrest. Sitting in jail, the judge says, did you pick up sticks? Yes. Are you pleading guilty? Yes. I advise you to plead not guilty. I'm plead guilty. I picked up the sticks on the Shabbat. Well, take him to the executioner. And that's what the law says. You violate the Shabbat, you're executed. The guy goes, okay, he's fine. No struggle. We don't find him saying anything. Now, this is a mystery of the Torah. You understand? This is a deep, deep mystery. There's nothing in the Bible. There's almost nothing in the Midrash that I know of that that gives us his motivations. So we are left completely moralist in trying to figure this guy out. So, uh, oh, by the way, he's known as Tzolofachad. Why? Because his daughters, five young women, call themselves Benot Tzolofachad, the daughters of Tzolofachad, and they say, our father was not in that gang of renegades called the Korach group who tried to take power. Our father died for his own sin. That's all the information you get. So the rabbis, with this rabbinic rule of parsimony, say if there is a sin that we don't know about and a guy that we don't know, and a sin where we don't know who the guy was, let's put them together. So we have their father, Tzlofachad, who committed some anonymous sin. You have a guy here where there's a sin, but we don't have a name to it. They just put him together. So people universally called him Tzlofachad. Okay, I don't want to do that tonight because that's already front loading the problem to the question. Their father, who died of his own sin, let's forget about him. We don't know what his sin was. And there's no reason for us to do what the rabbis did, is connect him to the man who did something. I'm sorry, the anonymous man who committed a sin versus the name of a man, and we don't know what his sin is. You can see the almost irresistible urge to put these together. So right now we're going to call him an anonymous man who committed something of a small sin, other than it's against the law. So he didn't even try the excuse, but it's such a small sin. When it comes to Shabbos violation in those days, it doesn't matter how small the sin is. It's a sin. Don't cross that line or you will die. Well, can I just sneak my foot over the line? No, just stay on your side of the line. Just don't pick up any sticks. He picks up sticks. So this week, as I was thinking this through, I reread what I'll call a rather poorly written book called Suicide and the Soul. You don't know what this book is about, and I'm not sure if it's really about anything. It's by James Hillman, and I'm such a fan of his that I expected it to be a lot better. But let me give you kind of the essence of it. And I thought the first few pages were worth the reading. I speed read through the rest. What he's saying is we don't talk about suicide other than suicide prevention. Everybody agrees on that. Right? But then you look at the different types of things that have tried to own suicide. So how does theology own suicide? It's a front against God. How does society confront suicide? Well, it's criminal, meaning you don't take your own life. Nishpas. You look at Durkheim. He's tried to sociologically understand who committed suicide. Well, country bumpkins who moved from this village into the city had a higher rate of suicide. The theory is alienation. Right? So there's a reason, but not a motivation. Durkheim was one of the first that came and said there are sociological reasons that don't translate into personal motivations. So a lot of study of it, but the premise of the study is it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing. And this raises the hackles on James Hillman. James Hillman says, what if we don't judge this and see it as a not uncommon human choice? And then he goes to list the number of well known people and their children who have committed suicide. Now, when I read this list, it took my breath away. I really wanted to cry. When you see people not who committed suicide, in war, but people who one day said, and we would say in our quotes, well, they had most things that people want in life. Well, it wasn't good enough for them, and they took their own lives. Now, as a clergy person, I've had to confront suicide m- m- more often than your average person, maybe except from a police officer or emergency room doctor. And I actually knew one young man before he committed suicide, and because he was having trouble, and I asked him. He said, he said, I have pain in my head. It's psychological. And when I take medication, it shuts, yeah, it takes care of the pain. Uh, but I'm not me anymore. I'm somebody else with less pain. And the minute I don't take the medication, I am I, but with pain that I can't bear. And so what do I do? And I was a very young person at the time. I said, "Look, I know a little bit about meditation and about mind, like the mind controlling the brain." And I offered a few things to him, and it was. I mean, he said, "Well, you really have good intentions, but it's not working here." I don't know if anybody could have helped him. And then I got the news that he had killed himself, and so I officiated the funeral. And here's good young man from a good house in Brentwood. Parents, you can imagine, just completely distraught, almost look like as if they had been murdered. And then people coming around them, and the question is why? Why? And I shared with them privately, he was in so much pain he no longer wanted to live. And they said, "Well, what about medication?" And I shared with them the conversation. The medication made him somebody else. So he chose to get out of here. He said, "Well, like he shouldn't have done that." And I remember did an okay job officiating, and I got in my car and I drove home. And I thought to myself, is that always true? Is that always true? That you have to live with pain because theologians and sociologists and doctors and so forth say you got to live with the pain because we don't like suicide. Something him said, you don't know me. You don't know what my life is about. You don't know the pain that I go through. And if I believe in the eternal soul and if I believe that there's a next world, I just want to get there. I want to move on. So as I studied Hillman's book, who says, let's stop judging it and let's understand it from the inside, there are many people who decide rationally that suicide is the best thing. I don't even like saying it. I mean, I'm so trained not to say this, but in the honor of this man who picked up sticks, fully expecting to be put to death, um, I want to ask, what did you go through? What did you go through? And you said to yourself, wow, I think I'm just going to go pick up sticks in public and be put to death. I don't want to go through this anymore. Okay, so why do people commit suicide? You know why? They lost all their money. A person they loved divorced them. Their life has not gone right. They never measured up to their father or mother. I mean, when you look at then they never measured up to what they thought they should be. They saw themselves as a loser from shame. When you look at the list of why people commit suicide, and people leave notes, they say, look, here's why I did it. I can't stand not being the success that my mother or father was, or I can't stand that my wife, husband left me. I can't stand that I've lost all my money and now I'm a nobody like everybody else. And they tell us why, saying living this life with this turn of events makes life worthless to me. I said, let me just take that as a starting place, as opposed to, he's the guy in the Bible that offended our theological norms. Okay, I'll call him Norm. Well, maybe he's not. Maybe he's a guy that suffered in a way that we cannot possibly imagine his suffering. And he said, I've got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. Now, what the Bible does, which is incredible for me, the Bible does not give us a reason. The Bible doesn't even condemn him. The Midrash has a couple of feeble remarks, but almost as if saying, "This is radioactive. We don't want to touch this." Right? Hopefully, nobody will notice that you go through the Bible, you go through Rashi. Rashi has no idea what to say about it. He says some inane thing, which is a way of saying, "I don't want to deal with this." You go to the Midrash. As far as I know, there's no Midrash that goes through this very deeply, and it says, "Okay, yeah, that happened, and now we're going to the next thing." So I'm stuck, and I want to, as a student, just I want to study this guy, and I want to feel him. I want to feel him. I want to go out that day. I want him to say, "Hey, I'm going to go commit suicide today. You want to walk with me?" And I want him to say, I don't think you should do this. He says, "Yeah, I know you do, because everybody says that. But I mean, you're going to walk with me or not? Because either I'll do this alone." I'm thinking to myself, I tear up as I think about it. I say, "Okay, I'll walk with you." And I say, "I'm not going to talk you out of it, man. If this is what you got to do, you got to do it. But can you tell me?" And he says something like, my wife left me for another man. I'm humiliated. I'm enraged. I'm ashamed. I feel like I, somebody else has my life and I cannot stand my feelings. Or I lost all my money and I used to throw my money around as if that's what my meaning in life was. I had more money than everybody else. I could control people. I could embarrass people. I could humiliate people, reward people as I wished. It's all gone. And I do not know how to make myself anew. Or he could have said, I have a bad disease. And this disease is going to kill, is going to wreck my body and tear me up. And if I don't do this today, I'm going to be helpless. I won't be able to kill myself tomorrow. Right. Um, my life has become meaningless. I mean, there are people who actually, life is meaningless, some kind of Nietzschean quandary where they can't make any sense of meaning in life. And they say, since there's no meaning in life, I don't want to be here. So you go from the most common down to the less common, but they're all relatively widespread. And I think to myself, I'm the guy standing with him, and I say, like I tried to do yesterday, I tried to feel him. I tried to stand next to him and said, I just want to be present to you. I just want to stand next to you. I don't want to judge you, but I want to feel your pain. I want to feel your pain. And I remember just trying to feel the pain of this anonymous man. Well, I could feel it. You guys know that I cry at the drop of a hat. So I began to tear up. I felt his pain. I felt the pain of an anonymous stand in a story from the Bible. And and then I wondered, is that why the story is here? Is the story here to help us not judge, not solve, but see a man in pain? Such pain that he needed to commit suicide by cop, as it were, you know, throw sticks out on Shabbos so that he get arrested and put to death. So his pain would be over. So would I accompany him? He gets arrested. Who are you? He asked me to stay with him. Okay. Who are you? He asked me to stay with him. Okay. Well, we're gonna execute him now. You want to stay here? Yeah, I'm gonna stay till the end. And then I go home, and my wife says to me, "What'd you do today?" I say, "I don't have the words to tell you what I've been through today, but I'll try." So that's where I came to in this drasha. So what do I have to say? What do I have to say to you? Some people need a witness. Some people need to do the unthinkable, and some people need to witness them along the way. Second thing, James Hillman, in a very odd way, compared suicide to Jungian analysis. And his reviewers were all angry at him. How dare you uh, compare suicide to Jungian analysis? And here's what he says. He says, true Jungian analysis is torture. You see things about yourself you don't want to know. You see your shadow. If you've never seen your shadow, you are shamed and humiliated by your shadow. You suddenly realize there's a force leaking out of your shadow that's been running your life. You think you've had free will? You haven't had free will. The shadow has been leaking out and making decisions for you, and you didn't know it. I remember when I went through that, and other people gone through it. They say, "Wow, I'm not who I thought I was. I am not who I thought I was." And when you really get a kind of an image of the Jungian shadow, it's a terrifying thing. So Hillman says, when you do depth psychology and you're able to go into the world of the shadow, you start to see how the self is actually formulated, which is far beyond mechanistic Freudian theories and kind of utilitarian cognitive theories, something deep and mysterious. And then Hillman says, and no Jungian analyst can truly tell the story of a client. No Jungian analyst can truly tell the story of a client because it's a secret. You can't say exactly what they went through because it's too horrendous. It's too shameful. So whenever a Jungian writes up a case in a journal, they're leaving something out. They have to. Whenever they mention a case, on a panel, they have to leave things out. Whenever I mention a case, I have to leave things out. Some things are just too horrible to imagine. So James Hillman finally says Jungian analysis is like suicide. It's an okay metaphor. And the reviewers were angry at him. How could you compare this to this and this Meshugas? And I thought to myself, okay, Hillman, I don't agree with you that physically taking your own life is a good, metaphor for going into analysis. Oh, but I get your point. And I rewound back to tonight's night. But again, that metaphor is still with me. I mean, it's a powerful metaphor. Um, that there is a kind of self-immolation when you go on the path to truth. The line that says, um, "L'olam yehi adam yarei shamayim basetu v'agului." May a person always um, yarei shamayim have dread of the divine basetu uvagalui, secretly and publicly. Umodeh al ha'emet, and admit the truth, v'dover emet bilvavo. So a Yerei Shamayim means a person who is, as it were, in awe of heaven. Someone who says, I'm not going to lie. Like, I'll lie to other people. I won't lie to God. I won't lie to myself. And I will say the truth. And then somebody who says the truth to themselves says, okay, that's my truth and I can't stand to live. All right, now I'm going to go back to this guy. If he is indeed Tzelofechad, what does his name mean? Well, Tzel means shadow and Pachad means fear. Pachad means fear. So we learn from this idea of having Yirat Shamayim, like quote unquote fear of heaven, that fear is a way to experience God, meaning the God whose eye is upon you and sees through all your falsities and all your pretenses and all the lies you tell everybody else, right? God, one of God's name in the book of Genesis is Pachad Yitzchak. Now, why would Yitzchak call his personal God Pachad Yitzchak, the fear of Isaac. And I'm just trying to think of a person who says, who's God to you? God sees through me, and it's terrible. Okay, I don't, I rarely think that, but try to imagine that's a person's connection with God is. I believe in God. God sees through me, and it's terrible, and I think about it all day. So if we want to give him the name Tzol Fachad, we can say Tzel Pachad. It works with the letters there. And my only goal here is to take a difficult text and bring to you the all policy possibilities for interpretation. All right, that concludes my teaching for tonight.